Well, hello there guys and girls, welcome back to another tutorial. So today we're going to be drawing hands. Now first things first, what's really convenient is you've probably got a hand on the end of your arm. How useful. Use that a lot as reference points, and you can use the other one to hold your pencil, so win-win if anything. Now I've done a hand tutorial before. It was basically kind of a knockoff of a Koizu tutorial, so you might as well just go and watch that, but the link will be up here. And that tutorial basically was all about looking at a hand in a relaxed position from different angles, so you kind of understood the thickness, the form and the build-up of everything. But really, if you're anything like me, when you're doing your character designs, you probably hit a stage where you're hiding the hands behind the back of your character, or you're having the arms go off the side of the page so that you don't have to draw what end up being really disformed and malfigured stumps and things like that. So you've got to just practice lots with hands. They're really difficult to kind of get your head around, but there are some super basic shapes. They're not impossible, no matter how much you think it might be out of your grasp. There's some real basic things to do to build up the form of hands, and after that, the practice is just going to take over. So let's go back to these super basics. The examples I'm going to be doing, just to follow the theme of where we are with the tutorials at the moment, are going to be super simple female hands. So grab yourself a sheet of paper, follow along at home. I've just got super cheap printer paper here. I've got quite a few sheets down so that it's a soft surface. Super cheap mechanical pencil. This one is a HB, but really it's quite a soft lead, so let's say 2B. You're going to make mistakes with hands, they're buggers. So here's a rubber, or an eraser as we're supposed to say nowadays. And also, cup of tea in the background won't hurt as well. Let's dive in. Now this might not be the perfect way to do it, so do watch loads of hand tutorials on YouTube. Everybody's got their own version. I like to start off with some basic things. Look at a hand, hello there, and you'll notice that there's this whole palm area, and that could kind of be described as a kind of squarish circle, and then you've got all your fingers coming off, and you'll notice firstly that this distance here, my longest finger, the middle one, the swearing finger, is about the same length as the palm itself, and that's going to be our measuring step number 1. So I'm going to go ahead and just draw a super simple hand as if I was drawing some kind of female anime character, and the hand's not in high detail, we just need to get one out of the way. And I'm going to do that by starting off with what might just be considered a circle. Let's just go round and round like so. Let's just make sure as well that that's in focus. Oh, brilliant. It just about is. And I'm going to have a hand just kind of coming off in this direction. And what I like to do is I flatten off the end of the circle almost into a square, as if the circle itself is sitting inside of a box. And that flat edge becomes all the knuckles for me. So I'm just going to take that circle shape, flatten it off like so. And so it means for me that the wrist is probably coming off of here. And then everything's going up there. And the order that I like to draw my hands in is always start from the wrist, and the hand grows out and the fingers grow off of the hands. Unless the hand is interacting with something, or it's a load of foreshortening where you might start off with the hand first, usually I start from the arm and grow out. So what I like to do personally is I just put in 4 points, roughly equally distant, along this edge. And for me, that just becomes a very rough guiding point of where the knuckles might be. But now that I know the length of the palm, I'm going to take this distance, I'm going to go this distance up again, around about here, and I know that the fingers are going to go no further than this point. So what I can do is, in a very simple sense, when it comes to a palm where all the fingers are together, you can often just map out very simple shapes. So I know that it's roughly going to go up like so on this side, roughly going to come up like so on that side, and the thumb will sit on the top. And with these ideas in mind, you can just grow your fingers out from the end. So where I've got these knuckle joints, I'm going to imagine one finger just comes up like a tube, just going to go all the way up and out, just like so. And obviously it's going to go off into a point, curve off as such. And then when it comes to the first fingers, and also the ring fingers as well, they're going to be a little bit shorter, but a very similar thing. So I'm going to have another tube that just comes up here, stops a little bit short, another one that's going to come up around about here, again, stops just short of this line, and the little finger, so useful to have hands, is much, much shorter again. So I'm going to bring this little finger just up, maybe I'm going to have it just come out just a little bit as well, and finish around about here. Now, in the last tutorial, I did talk about the fact that the finger joints are split in such a manner that the first joint is almost halfway, kind of stops around about here, and then the next one is a little bit smaller, and then the very end joint is the smallest space of the finger, so to speak, and then it just gets brought down a little bit, each finger, and so on. Although we're not going to worry too much about that, we are drawing the back of the hand, but this gives you an idea of how we get those fingers in. You can then get your thumb in, and I often do this just by creating a lump that comes off of the side, just a bulge like this. And then there's two real stages to the thumb that grows off. One is just the main part of the thumb finger area, and the other is just that very large thumb area off the top. So I can just get that in as another shape as well. And that really is just a super simple hand shape. Let's see how that's doing through the camera phone. Make sure that's nice and in focus. And what I'm going to do is just kind of follow this very basic building block shape to get a few more examples in. This is going to be a relatively quick tutorial with any luck. Now, when it comes to doing those female hands, it's often nice to just turn the points just into nails that might just kind of point ever so slightly off of the end. And remember, for the most part, all you've ever got to worry about is this rough outline shape. It's just the outline that you might be keeping with a lot of your drawings, because this is all about just getting a hand shape, a good hand lump off the end of the arm stump. Ooh, gross. But you kind of know what I'm getting at. So let's have another go of exactly this idea, and just have the fingers maybe a bit more further out and splayed, and we're going to just talk about the gaps in between. So once again, I'm just going to get myself a nice big circle around about here, kind of like so. I'm going to flatten off the part where I want the hand to be off to the right, so this becomes my palm, so to speak. Who knows where the wrist is, it might just be coming down off here. And another thing as well is that the more detail you build up, the bigger the hands are, the closer they are to the viewer, or the more focus you put on the hands, the more little extra nuances you need to learn about. But for basics, you can also know there's often a bit of a circular shape here and a bump here as well, just to indicate the bones of the forearm where they meet the wrist. It's not the most important thing in the world for the basics, but certainly worth mentioning. So I've got the end line here. I know I'm going to have knuckles all the way down here. These are where the fingers are going to sprout from, and the thumb as well. In this example, still has that lump off to the side, but if I splay the thumb out, I might just have a thumb just shoot right off and back like so. And you'll notice the back end of the thumb, I'm drawing with straight lines, just like here, and then the inside edges, I'm still using more curved shapes to bring that in. So, once again, I know this distance here is going to mark as approximately here. That'll be the longest, furthest away point. And now, just to get those fingers in, if I start from the very top, I'm going to have one finger not come anywhere near that point. Just imagine these as cylinders that turn into points or weird missile shapes, who knows what you want to call them. And then now, because the fingers are splayed apart, I'm going to have a bit of a gap here, almost where there might be webbing, so to speak, if you were kind of a mutant. And then the next finger, the longest one, probably going to make it all the way out to that end line, just like so. Great. Another bit of web, and then let's get another finger, not quite making it all the way out again, nice and splayed apart. You'll notice I'm moving my arm around so that I can get some nice, easy, smooth lines working together. And then the little finger, when you splay your palm out, that little finger can shoot off at quite an angle, quite independently. So let's just go off down here, really randomly, for this little guy. And there you go, you've got this nice, wide open setup. Now there's all sorts of things where you might start from here, especially if you watch a lot of other tutorials. They'll say start from here and understand that the bones all start from inside the hand. It grows all the way out to the end, which is absolutely fine. But when you're just trying to get a really quick hand in on the end of the arm of your female characters, just understanding these really basic shapes is going to help a lot. This isn't going to be one of those tutorials where there's 100 different examples of hands. holding cups and opening doors and things. That'll be for the future. We will go through a lot more hand tutorials because there's just so much variation and things to talk about. But let's just keep getting this really smooth, loose idea going. But let's up the game plan. Let's look at the inside of the hand just a little bit. I'm going to have an arm that's up, and I'm going to have a hand that is maybe just a bit like this, a bit on angle, but you see it from the inside edge. So let's go ahead again, just making sure everything's on the page. And let's say that's the end of our wrist. And I'm going to have it so that the thumb side of the hand is furthest away and the little finger edge is closest to us. Now I've got this circle, sure, when we're looking flat, but maybe I need to imagine that as being a bit more of a disc. So in this example, this circle probably is going to be shaped a bit more like this. So I'm going to imagine that it still has thickness. So I'm going to create a kind of disc shape. Maybe it's something like this. Again, I'm just going to flatten off the edge of it, where the fingers are probably going to come from. And I'm going to just mark in some knuckles. Because this is foreshortened, they're probably just going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way there. And most of it will be covering itself with all the fingers and bits. And the shape of the thumb is probably going to be, again, a lump around about here. And then the thumb's just going to go maybe up and off and do its own thing. So if I just get this thumb out of the way very quickly, it's just kind of growing off at this point here. And you'll notice I'm separating this thumb into its own kind of rough tubular shape, like so. And drawing in maybe just a bit of a lifeline. So this is where the palm itself creates this line here. This is called your lifeline on your hand. Something like so. And then if you imagine that this thickness, this flat area on the little edge of the hand is going to sort of run up here, we know our little finger is going to grow out the top here. Now, because the little finger is the nearest to us, I am going to start with this, and I'm going to give it a really light bit of curve and bend. So I'm going to go up and just imagine that if this is the length of the palm, the longest finger is probably going to be somewhere up here, that distance again. Just a really loose curving line that helps me understand where the fingers aim out towards. The little finger I'm going to have just kind of come up, and I'm just going to get its various segments in. So I'm going to have it just be sort of one joint from here, and then maybe just kind of curving a bit there, and just a little bit more there. The very end is, again, a straighter line for the back where the nail is, a curve for where the fingerprint part is, and then again, just building up these rough shapes to get that curve in. And then the next finger behind it is going to be maybe much straighter, much pointier. So let's come straight up and out, and up again. Again, just getting that flat line almost curving back and out, just so that it really exemplifies the smooth inside part of the finger itself. Just a little notch and line in to show where things bend. Obviously that's coming sort of right in behind this finger. And then the next finger itself, the longest one, is probably just going to be right up, out there, super long and straight, hidden mostly by everything else. And then the last finger itself as well, maybe just kind of coming up and off here behind everything else. Just to create a hand which is kind of just gesturing lightly. So to show the curves and folds of the inside of the palm, probably going to do, I think this is the headline it's called or something like that, but just another line perhaps to indicate the inside edge, like so, just to get a good gesturing hand shape going out. So hopefully again that gives you that kind of really rough idea. We're just starting from these shapes, we're building up. The thumb you can just have kind of grow a bit more off of the wrist there out of the side. And I will certainly go around and just show you exactly the shapes that we're keeping in a kind of deeper highlight or deeper outline in a moment, because this is full of all sorts of building instructions. Now what a lot of people also like to do is when they're getting their fingers to come out of the hand, is they might just draw the middle lines, or they might just draw circles at every single joint as well. All of these things are absolutely fine. Use whatever technique works for you. And I do think about these circles, but I just tend to imagine them now more than drawing them in. It makes my life a little bit easier. So again, keeping it simple, let's do just a couple more examples. Maybe a very kind of standard, a hand that is just over. So when you draw a lot of characters, their hands kind of cross over the chest or come near the face and so on. And a very common thing you'll see with a lot of female anime characters when you see a lot of artwork is that the hand tends to show one finger out, the first finger out, and the two in the middle kind of just together as a very relaxed, natural thing. So if you imagine we've got an arm coming maybe up here, we're still going to have our hands going off to the right. And maybe the wrist just kind of stops here like so. Then, let's just check. Still in L focus, lovely. Then this kind of palm circle shape, I'm just going to have going straight off to the right at an angle, just to show that the wrist is a bit more limp, the hand is a bit more relaxed. And again, this kind of circle shape is going to get flattened out towards the end. And you can often just imagine these palms as being this rough paddle shape. The more used to this you get, the easier it is to map out roughly where your hand's going to be. And again, 1, 2, 3, 4 is where I'm going to have the fingers coming from. Again, I know what this distance is. So if I just go out here, I know that it's probably going to be something like that, a curve off the end to show where the fingers might end up. And what I'm going to do in this example, which is quite common as well with simple hand design, is I'm actually only going to really show sort of one joint in this instance, just the first joint, the main one that's around about here, and let the rest of the fingers be straight. So if we imagine we've got our little fingers firstly, maybe this is coming off really near towards us, and so I'm just going to have it come out off the end of the hand, get one joint in, so maybe it just drops down into that light point again, and then a tiny bit of space of web, so to speak, and then the two middle fingers are going to be really sort of together, almost treated as one. So I'm going to come out again far, like so, maybe just drop off around about here, and you can kind of imagine that this is the point at which we've got that big main joint, just dropping that finger down into a point like so. And then the next one, right next to it, I'm just going to follow along. Obviously, this finger is a little bit longer, so it's just going to overshadow the other one and come right up to that line. And these two are just going to be drawn together like so. Then our first finger can be just off doing its own thing. Maybe a bit of a lump now, where I've got this knuckle joint. And maybe even here, where we've got this knuckle circle that I've put in, we'll just show a little bit of raised area. And we'll just have this finger just kind of stretch out a bit, maybe still just slightly change direction. And just kind of go off to a point as so, before reaching back into the hand. And this is a very common, just a very loose kind of gesture or sway. So we're starting from the wrist, we're growing out this really simple paddle shape that's kind of a circle, but it's flattened off at the end. And then just divide it into 4 any way you like. You could literally just notch it if you wanted, but I just put on these small circles to indicate the center of where the fingers are growing out from. And then if you imagine, I've got this imaginary curve here that shows me where all the joints line up, and another curve here to show me the outer limit of the reach of the fingers. And again, you'll notice I'm kind of curving into points, but you could, if you wanted, just actually turn these into feminine nails on the end of everything, if that's how you like to do things. So these are the basic things we're always playing around with. Let's have one go at something which is ever so slightly more involving, and then we'll be able to wrap up. Because again, I just want you to understand from this tutorial how I tend to do things, how I kind of go, right, if there's an arm here, then I'll have a paddle shape and I'll have some fingers, and that way at least I've drawn a hand that doesn't look terrible, which allows me to actually get on with my life and continue designing characters without it being such a headache. And that's the fun of basics sometimes. It never hurts to come back to the basics. So let's have a very common foreshortened one, hand reaching out to us, the viewer. This is one I did on the Akeno Himejime SAS for fan art image I did from High School D times D, I think it is. And a really simple thing. But if you imagine the wrist is here, we'll never see this wrist because the palm is right in front of it. So if we just go ahead and create our circle really foreshortened towards us. And if you imagine, in this example, that flat edge is right round here. and it's pointing in. With a difficult shape, we can start to maybe map it out with lots of kind of building blocks and lines as well first. So if I imagine that this is kind of where the palm is and my fingers are kind of coming out from around about these points, maybe I'm just going to measure in another curve that kind of shows this foreshortening, just to help me understand where the fingers are going to go out towards. And maybe I'll just have some lines in this instance. 1, 2, 3, and 4, just helping me with that rough mapping of the hand. And the whole palm area as well is going to be a little bit different. So maybe if I understand that the palm is going to be sort of a raised area around about here. And then if the thumb is kind of coming off towards us like so, I can just indicate that with another line here. But we're still going to otherwise use the same building block steps to put that all together. So from this finger, from this hand I should say, if I start with the main areas, we're looking down on things. So this cylindrical shape comes into play more. Instead of a flat line where the finger comes out, it's a bit more of a curve. And I can just bring one curving out shape round about like so. Again, just going off into gentle point. Then I know that the hand's just going to come up to the thumb area. So maybe when we get the thumb in, it's a case of this cylinder sits here, and then the rest of the thumb is just shooting off like so. Then maybe I've got a tiny bit of web space here, another cylinder for the middle finger, which is again coming down towards that line that I've drawn in. And you might draw your fingers too fat, you might draw them too thin, and then you can just rub them out and redraw them a little bit thinner, a little bit thicker as you see fit. Don't worry about it too much. Just get the rough idea going down, and then you'll just see that I'm doing the same thing. Fairly flat line for one side to kind of show the back edges of the finger, the knuckle side. Much more curved as I'm bringing that line back in for the inside edge. And again, the little finger right off doing its own thing. Maybe just out here before curving back into the hand like so. And then you've got the other part of the palm here. And then maybe you'd have the odd sort of line around about there. But then again, it gives you this point. Now with the foreshortened part of things, what also, again, just sorting out that focus, what also doesn't hurt sometimes is if you just actually indicate the initial pads of the fingers that are pointing towards us. So that is very simple. It's just a case of kind of just getting in these rough ellipses just to show the fingertips, that very last joint like so. And you might not actually draw these in as circles like such, but it will help you understand the shapes of the fingers. It will help you understand where your shading's going to be as well, if you're going to put much detail on it. So I do recommend check out that SAS video, with any luck, if I remember. There'll be a link up there right now. Because there is a part in that where I really get into detailed shading on a hand that's doing a very similar thing to this one. But otherwise, that is it. I'm going to really quickly just pop into some time lapse where I put some very heavy outlines around the outside edges of the hand, just to show that we're actually not using too much detail. We're keeping the shapes fairly simple, and then we'll wrap up. Oh, yay! And welcome back. So hopefully you can see that once we've got the outline of these hands out the way, it doesn't actually need to include a lot of the building blocks that we've used on the inside. We're just learning to create some really basic, almost silhouettes if you like, of hand shapes, and make sure we get them correct, just so that they're not going to trouble you when you're getting your own character designs out the way. Now, these are the techniques I use for female anime characters or very nondescript male anime characters. All of the form is very slight, it's very dainty, it's not overly thick, and there's not lots of detail around the knuckles and the shapes of the fingers, and there's not lots of extreme angles. That is on purpose. Separately, we'll worry about hand tutorials where everything's a bit more extreme, and when it comes to really strong, muscly fighting characters, male or female, you actually use some slightly different techniques to draw the hands, which we'll come to. But I hope you guys found this tutorial to be useful. I hope you've had a go at home and at least have a little bit more confidence at getting some basic hand shapes out of the way. So don't forget to come click subscribe if you're not already subscribed to the channel. We've got loads more tutorials moving forward. Give it a like and all that stuff and ting. And don't forget, you can always check out my Patreon page where your support makes all of this possible. Tiny donations are great, you get loads of art rewards. But otherwise, have yourselves a lovely week. Take care.